We're a 501c3 based out of the San Francisco Bay Peninsula. That's a mouthful. I'm in my office here in Menlo Park, and what we believe is that wellness experience, access, having choice should be a human right. It should be available to everyone. So we love to have our wellness tool belts full of different tools, right? Maybe it's breathing, maybe it's movement, maybe it is sound, maybe it is all the many parts of nutrition, which is such a big, it's such a big subject. And today we're going to work in the realm of carbs. And I know some people go, oh, carbs, they're bad. They're bad, but they taste so good. Well, we're going to work through that today and get some science and some facts, and we're going to learn that carbs are actually our friend and they're a necessity to our nutrition tool belt and our wellness toolkit. And Mukta is going to guide us through that today. So everyone, most of you have joined us before. I see some names I'm not familiar with, and I love that. So welcome, welcome. I'm going to introduce Mukta here, and she's going to guide us through loving our carbs. Hello, Mukta. You ready to go?
Yes, I am ready. Mel, just as a heads up, I'm not able to see my chat from the phone, so
Okay.
I might need to call on you. Hi. All right. Hi, everyone. I am going to quickly go ahead and share my screen really quick. And here we go. Awesome. Well, welcome to Love Your Carbs. This is a kind of a hot topic, I would say. You know, there's people that are really scared of carbs, like Mel mentioned. There's people who maybe eat too many carbs. But I think on a whole right now, there's more of that, you know, carbs are bad for you, you know, restrict them, go low carb, go no carb, what have you. And I'm here to tell you that is not the case. You want to love your carbs. You want to live peacefully and happily with your carbs. And there is a way to do that. So without further ado, I am going to see if this actually works. Hold on 1 second. My slides are not, there we go. Okay. So who am I? I know many of you on the call, but if you don't know who I am, I'm a holistic nutritionist and coach, and I am based in San Jose. I'm also the owner of Mukta's Nutrition Kitchen, and you can find me on Instagram at Muk's Cooks. And I focus on coaching busy, ambitious women and help them resolving their stress-related health issues, things like depletion, digestive issues, and basically try to help them feel empowered with their food choices, help them create healthy boundaries, and help them show up nourished, you know, fully themselves, show up alive for the lives that they love. Here's just a little snapshot of what I love to do. I love to be in water, love big trees, wildflowers, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of why I'm so passionate about carbs, because I focus so heavily on stress management, a big piece of that is learning how to balance your blood sugar and learning how to steady that. And of course, you know, a small piece of that puzzle is learning about carbs. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, I want to share with you the basics. So before we love our carbs, we have to get to know them. We have to learn about the role that they play, learn a little bit about whole versus refined carbs, and then learn which carbs to love, which ones to limit. I'm going to talk a little bit about sugar and wholesome sweeteners, as well as simple swaps that you can make. But I do want most of this class to be practical and interactive. So I would like to spend a big chunk of the last like 20 or so minutes practicing nutrition labels, because I think the more that you know and the more that you're able to make an educated decision, the closer you will get to living peacefully and in harmony with carbs. All right. And also, just in case any of you missed it in the chat, I did ask as a prep for this call to bring 1 to 2 carbs from your home. It could be anything, because we're gonna discuss it later. But then also, if you have a nutrition label that you want us to decipher at the end, if there's time, we'll go over it. So go ahead and grab that as well while you're on this call. Okay, so first things first, what is a carb? I would love to hear what carbs people have brought. And actually, I think I'm able to pull up the chat here. So hope this isn't too disruptive to everyone else. But tell me, what carbs can you name? Pasta and rice, wonderful. What else? Come, throw them at me. Bread, okay, what else? Nuts, absolutely. Apples, yep, noodles. Any others? All right, I've got a few here. Potatoes, absolutely. I have a summer squash here. I have a sweet potato. That's a carb. Let's see. I have some farro over here. That's a carb. I have some prunes. Those are carbs. These are just random things from my pantry. And I have some garbanzo beans. Those are carbs. And we normally think of them as protein, but they're also pretty heavy in fiber. So lentils, absolutely. So these are all wonderful examples of carbs. So a carb is basically one of your essential macronutrients. You have protein, you have fats, and you have carbs. And that just means that you need, when you think of a macronutrient, you need this for your body to function. In order to survive, you need carbs. Okay, so let's look at some of the essential functions of carbs. First things first, I think most of you know this. It's a fantastic source of energy for your cell. So you get glucose from carbs. Carbs get converted to glucose. That's sugar, and your cells need that. Your brain needs that. Your muscles need that. Your organs need carbs to function. Okay. You also need the antioxidants, the enzymes, and the fiber in carbs for your protein and fat metabolism. So think about that for a second. If you're eating a lot of protein and a lot of fat, you still need the carbs in order to digest that so that your body knows how to use them. Okay, so this is not an option to remove carbs completely from your diet. You also need them for optimal detox and gut health. So your liver needs carbs in order to detox properly, needs the fiber to detox properly. You need fiber to poop. I'll know this. And then our gut bacteria loves fiber. So again, not having carbs, if you're on a low carb diet, you might find that, you're missing out in other aspects of your health as a result. But as we know, all carbs are not equal. And so we're going to take a look at whole versus refined carbs. Now, if you have any questions as we're going along, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll probably not get to them until the end. But, Mel, if there's any questions that come up that I absolutely have to respond, let me know, and I'll address it. So let's talk about, because this is one of those areas where, I think a lot of people, when they think of carbs, they say, hey, well, it's a good carb versus a bad carb. We're going to stay away from that language as much as possible. And I would just like to call them whole versus refined, okay, for this class. So what's a whole carb? The best way to think about a whole carb is, what does this carb look like in nature? So, sweet potato is an example. This is what you get in nature. That's what you harvest, right? So that's a whole carb. The farro is a whole carb because, again, that's what you harvest from nature. So we've got the potatoes, we've got corn, we've got bell peppers, beans, avocado. Most people think of avocados as a fat, and it is a fat, but it also has a lot of fiber. So avocados are one of those great kind of 2-in-1 type foods that you can get a lot of value out of. So whole carbs have all the good stuff. They have fiber, They have antioxidants, things like vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients. They have starches and sugars, and they have a little bit of protein. And I mentioned some of these benefits before with what you get out of fiber, things like help with detox, gut health. Fiber is also super important for a steady blood sugar levels. Antioxidants, things like your vitamins and minerals, colors, the colors that you get from fruits and veggies, those are so important. They're actually immunoprotective, so they help protect and boost your immune system. They're also incredibly important for various cellular functions. Like, we're not going to get into the ins and outs of it because antioxidants are so key to your body being able to thrive. Things like energy production, again, steadying blood sugar, and then lowering oxidative damage and lowering inflammation. So that is your antioxidant category. Starches and sugars, again, play their part in energy. You also need certain starches for gut health and also to steady blood sugar. And the R starch is basically resistant starch. Okay, so as you can see, the whole carb brings a lot to the table. Now, what's a refined carb? When you look at the examples that I've given you here, things like potato chips, cornflakes, most cereals, sugar, white sugar, pasta, red wine, all of those are considered refined carbs. So when you look at those, you'd be able to figure out what the source is, right? So for potato chips, it's potatoes, cornflakes from corn, sugar from various things like sugar beets or sugar cane, wine from grapes, that sort of thing. So they have been extracted, right, in some fashion. Now, the whole concept of refining goes way back to like the Industrial Revolution, when the government found out that refined carbs actually have are more shelf stable, right? They last longer, they are more convenient. You can easily slip them into different foods. They taste great. And, in some cases, they're actually more digestible, right? So when you think about wheat, for example, you're not going to eat wheat as a whole carb. You have to eat it in some form of refinement. So a refined carb is really a carb that's processed. And when you think about processed, it's basically taking out, I have this little box up here that says it basically removes 79% or so of the fiber, 70% of the minerals, about 66% of the vitamins, which are super essential for energy production and stress management, various things like that. And then about 19 to 20% of protein. So you're losing a lot. And this is just a snapshot, right? You're losing a lot more than this, but this is a snapshot. Now, what's important to note, and I think most of you know this too, is like all refined carbs are not equal either. And we're not going to be able to go down that road, but I can give you a few examples of what happens when you refine and then refine it further. So we're gonna go over that in a second. But when I think about refined carbs, and I think I'm a little bit alone in this, because when I mention this to my friends and my clients, they look at me like I'm crazy. But when you think about a refined carb, I think of it as empty food. So I love my food and I want to make it count. So when I take the time to sit down and eat, I want that to be good for me in some form. And because the refined carbs are typically so stripped, they don't make me feel good. And that's one of the reasons that I choose not to maybe eat as many refined carbs. The other thing about it is, you're also compromising the benefits you would get out of the whole carbs. But what we often forget is that because you're stripping so much out of it, the refined carb behaves like sugar in your body. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a future class called Blood Sugar Basics. So I'm not going to talk about the effects of sugar on the body as much today, but I will, continue to remind you that refined carbs act like sugar. I think that's one of the basic things that um, makes refined carb problematic. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples here. So here we have a half a cup of cooked brown rice and a half a cup of cooked white rice. These are only some of the nutrients. The list is super long, and I, didn't think we would have time for this. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what we might be missing out on with a refined carb here. In this case, it's white rice, right? So I also want to, before I jump into that, I also want to be very careful here to not label again, label this as brown rice is good, white rice is bad, because the reality is that there's cultures and traditions that have eaten white rice for centuries. And I think at the end of the day, it's just knowing, okay, what am I missing out on with white rice, and how can I compensate, with other things, with other foods. And does white rice make me feel good? I think that's the basic thing. When clients come to me and say, I feel so guilty, I ate white rice. I'm like, well, how did you feel? And they felt great, So I think it's listening to your body as well. Personally, for me, if I eat too much white rice, I feel a little bit bloated. And so I tend to make the choice to eat more brown rice. When you look at the nutrient differences, you can see that there's less fiber, there's a little less protein, and then significantly, the minerals significantly drop off. Magnesium and potassium are, again, just a couple of the examples of minerals that I have pointed out. But magnesium is, it's one of the essential nutrients that unfortunately a lot of our food sources no longer have, because the soil just doesn't have enough magnesium in it. And deficiencies of magnesium are very, very common. So if you're going to get magnesium from a whole grain, I would say get it. You need magnesium for things like hundreds and hundreds of enzyme reactions. So, it's essential in a lot of different aspects of your life, but of your health, but also stress management is key. Magnesium is considered a relaxant, and then energy production as well. So I would say, looking at the difference, 39 grams versus 9.5, to me, that's a pretty clear, it shows pretty clearly which one's more nutrient dense. Potassium is another one of those nutrients, but I think the one piece that I would say, the one function of potassium is that it helps regulate blood pressure. So now if you are eating a lot more of the refined, where you're not getting as much magnesium, not as much potassium, you are going to over time feel the knock-on effects of that. Okay, now here is an example of refined versus more refined. So we've got whole grain flour, okay, which we know comes from things like wheat. In this day and age, it comes from a lot of different things, but we've got, just for the sake of example, it's come from wheat, okay? And we've got 1/4 cup of whole grain flour here, which is refined. And then we've got a 1/4 cup of bleached flour, which is even more refined. So it's, they've pulled out even more. Like, you can see that in the nutrients as well. So the fiber significantly goes down. The protein goes down. Magnesium, again, a huge difference. And potassium, again, a really, really big difference. So even with whole grain flour, even though it's refined, you're still getting some benefits out of it. I would say if you took it a step further and you're like, well, I want to go closer to the source, you probably want to be looking at something like stone ground, which is probably the least refined, least processed version of wheat or whole grains. Okay. Are there any questions? I feel like I have gone pretty quickly through some material. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but if there are any, please feel free to jump in. Okay. All right, so just to give you a quick recap of what we talked about with refined, there's a lack of fiber, so you are going to experience, poor blood sugar responses, probably going to be more of the spikes, more of the lows, and then poor detox. So lack of fiber is often associated with things like high cholesterol. That's pretty common. Loss of other nutrients. So here's the thing, like your body is actually designed to process whole foods. Your body knows exactly what to do with it. Now, this is just assuming, you don't have any sensitivities or allergies. Your body just generally knows, okay, this is where I put the carbs, this is where I put the protein, this is how I take everything out and use the enzymes and the antioxidants. Now, when there's no minerals, your body's actually feeling a lack now. And so it starts to pull these nutrients from other parts of your body. So it pulls it from your bones, pulls it from your organs. And so this is actually depleting your body. And it is creating a strain that you didn't have before. Okay, so it may taste great, but there are knock-on effects if that's what you're prioritizing on the whole. Okay. And then finally, I mentioned earlier, refined behaves like sugar in the body. So this adds to oxidation, adds to inflammation, and then there's that element of addiction as well. So, you think about the Pringle ad, once you pop, you can't stop, or even just sitting down with a bag of potato chips or crackers or Doritos, things like that. Yeah, the salt adds to the addiction, but it's also that element of like, the refining has an opiate effect like sugar does on your brain. Okay, so once in a while, probably not a problem, but over time, it does add up. So now what do we do? Do we just avoid refined completely? I say no. I say we can find a balance because the good news is there's so many foods that give you the whole, like the benefits of the whole foods that, and we'll look at that in the next slide, that if you're able to prioritize those, having your refined dessert once in a while, your donut, your chips, even a soda once in a while should not make a difference, but once in a while. Okay, once in a while to me might mean something totally different to you. And once in a while, I would say is probably like once a month. Okay, maybe even less frequently. But my point is, if your body is used to whole foods, having a refined snack or a dessert now and then is not going to affect it as much as it would if you're constantly eating refined foods. Okay, so as you can see here, if you're eating too few whole carbs, you're going to have trouble digesting your fats and protein, possibly some constipation, other nutrient deficiencies like magnesium, potassium. You'll probably have some imbalances in some nutrients because of that. And then too many refined carbs, you've got blood sugar issues, which lead to things like diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol, as I mentioned earlier, stress or mood issues. That's a really big one that not many people connect the dots with blood sugar and refined carbs. And then post-meal slumps, and then aging, because you're increasing the level of oxidation, you're increasing the inflammation. And so too many refined carbs isn't a good thing. Okay, so what do? We try to crowd out our plate and our meals with the whole carbs. Okay, so these are the really good ones. And when I say good ones, I mean they're full of all the good stuff, things like fiber, antioxidants, all the stuff we mentioned earlier. And then you try to limit the refined as much as possible. In some cases, it's inevitable. Okay, so the first example is a good one where refined baked goods, it's not that easy to find really good bread unless you make your own at home. That doesn't cost $7. Like Dave's Killer Bread, amazing bread, but it costs like $6 or $7. And who wants to spend that kind of money? So I think looking at the refined, what you're getting out of it, things like enriched flour, bleached, how can you compensate by including more of the whole? So if you're eating lots of beans and legumes, fruits and veggies, mushrooms, so for the most part, your diet contains, whole grains and the foods listed on the whole side. If you're having, refined foods once in a while, it shouldn't throw things off too dramatically. I will say there's a few in the refined column that I would be kind of saying avoid, because they do have pretty massive effects on your body. Things like high fructose corn syrup, it is so sweet and so addictive that if you ever see that on a label, you probably want to just throw it right out. And unfortunately, candy typically will have things like that. Dressings will have that. Cornstarch is a bit iffy. I know it's used a lot in different foods as a thickener. There are alternatives. Arrowroot powder is one of them. I would say, again, if you're not using it like constantly, fine, but also see where you can compensate for it. So if you've got a lot of cornstarch, if you're using a lot of cornstarch, where can you add fiber? Where can you increase your vegetables, for example? Or can you add beans to the meal? Can you add whole grains instead of white rice? So it's trying to find your own balance here. Another one that I wanted to mention, we're going to talk about the sugars a little bit. You'll notice I've got oats and all and aspartame listed. Now, those are just ways for you to be able to identify what a sugar looks like on a label. So typically, things like glucose, lactose, sucrose, fructose, if that shows up on a label, you'll know that that is sugar. If it's got an OL next to it, it typically will mean it's a sugar as well. It's just a sugar alcohol. And they're not all, not necessarily a bad thing, like things like erythritol and xylitol. The thing is that those sugar alcohols can trigger sensitivities. So again, you have to figure out what works best for you. Let's see, what else did I want to bring up here? Let's see, are there any questions about this slide?
You have
Yes,
you have a few questions in here, and I've just given you a head up on time. It's 12:31. You had Preeti asked when it comes to weight loss, I've always feel like doing a low carb diet. I think she's asking,
yeah,
all the rate,
idea?
but all your carbs. And then the other one is stated that she finds it hard to difficult to juggle between carbs and sugar.
Okay, let me just see that question. Find it difficult to juggle between carbs and sugar. Okay, so the low carb question, I will say that a couple of things. One is a one size fits all diet doesn't work for everyone. So, if you're hearing that low carb seems to work for everyone out there in the keto community, paleo community, what have you, wonderful. I find that low carb, as soon as you start thinking like that, like low carb, it makes it restrictive and you lose the fun. You lose the fun of eating. You lose the enjoyment that comes out of, everything. So I would say for that, and this is why I work one-on-one with clients, because personalized nutrition is so important. One of the things that you can try, because I'm all for experimenting, try to see, try it and see what happens. You know, if it's stressful, don't do it. If you find yourself counting carbs and, you know, like, oh my God, I had like 20 grams today. This is way more than my limit. Don't do it. That's the reason I have always stayed away from diets, because it's just too stressful and you kind of lose the plot. So try it, but also listen to your body. Your body will tell you exactly what it wants. Okay. But happy to chat later if that's helpful as well, Preeti. And then finding it difficult to juggle between carbs and sugar. I'm not entirely sure what that question is. If you want to elaborate on it, please feel free to do that, and I will try to address it later on. Yes, wine is a carb. Is wine a refined carb? All right, Vivian. Think about where wine comes from, right? It comes from the grape. So in order to go from grape to wine, it has to be processed. So yes, wine is a refined carb. Sorry. Okay. A couple of other things on here, just very quickly. Enriched flour is a red flag that I want to mention very quickly, because if you see enriched anywhere, it means that they've removed, in the process of refining, they've removed the vitamins and minerals and then they put them back in. And your body does not digest them as well as they would from a whole carb. So whenever you see enriched, always just, you know, ask those questions. Like, why did they have to enrich it? Why couldn't they just leave it whole? Okay, because you will find a whole equivalent of it. Okay. This is a slide that I was wondering whether I should change or leave as is, and I figured I would leave it as is. I'm sure most of you are looking at this going like, I thought she was going to talk about wholesome sweeteners that we could actually use. Instead, we've got dates and dried fruit and cacao nibs and cinnamon. Look, I wanted to make a point. I want to help you start to change the way you think about whole carbs. Okay, so if you ask me about a sweetener that's going to be really, really good for you and will probably knock your blood sugar levels, this is the list I'm going to give you. Okay, I do have another list for you, so I'll show it to you in a second. But start thinking in that way. Like, okay, I have a sweet tooth. How can I incorporate a whole sweetener into my baking? I've used raisins and prunes before in my baking, and it's worked fine. I've used apples before, I've used bananas, and it's not going to taste the same. It's never going to taste like a refined carb. But I implore you to try and just see how your body feels. If your body doesn't like it, fine. But I have found that when you do try to keep things whole, you don't have the sugar highs. Your brain processes it better. You feel focused. You still have the mental clarity. You have the energy, and it's like you enjoyed a treat that was good for you. And you don't always have to do that, but that's just one way to look at it. Okay, you are going to get the sugar guide as a takeaway. There's a lot of information on here, and that's why I'm not going to go over it during this class, but this will help you determine what sweetener to use, because I've classified it by ultra refined all the way to whole, and try to kind of, these are my recommendations based on current research. Things are always changing, so take a look at it, and if you ever have questions about it, just send me a note. Also, just know that if you're looking for swaps, like quick swaps, like, okay, how much maple syrup did I use instead of sugar in a baking recipe? The internet is full of resources. So if you don't find what you're looking for, just feel free to contact me, okay? Simple swaps, and then we'll jump right into the nutrition labels. These are a few practical tips on, if you feel like you looked at my list of refined and you're like, oh God, I eat all of that all the time. Just think of making small changes. You don't have to make all those changes. You don't have to throw everything out yet. Just start to introduce things slowly. So if you eat a lot of white bread, start buying multigrain or seed bread. And the way I like to think of it is, and you'll see seeds in it. You'll see the oats, so you'll know that you're getting some extra fiber. You're getting a little bit more from it, because as I said earlier, bread is going to be refined flour, made of flour. Cook half white, half brown rice together. That's an easy one. They have different cooking times, but I do this all the time. And it works fine. You might have to play with it a little bit. And there is an adjustment in your taste buds, but the more you do it, the more you listen to your body, the more your body is like, oh my God, I love this, because I can now think clearer, the more these habits will continue. Experiment with other grains, add nuts and seeds to your cereal if you love the cornflakes, if you love oats, things like that. Oats are whole grains, but next class you'll learn about blood sugar and that sort of thing. So if you're interested, sign up for my next class. But nuts and seeds are a really good way to kind of offset the blood sugar aspect. Fruits and veggies, easy one, leave the peel on. I always leave the peel on. Sweet potatoes, pumpkin, potatoes. Potatoes, again, people ask me, are they bad for you? Leave the peel on, try to eat it, as close to the source as possible. Diversify the veggies that you're eating. And a potato is not going to be bad for you. It's fine. It's a potato. Eat root to leaf. A lot of plants, like the beetroot, for example, you can eat the root, which is the beetroot, and you can eat the leaves. Try to maximize the nutrition you're getting from plants. Make snacks at home. Sweet stuff, we talked a little bit about this. The orange juice and dressings, that's one that I was recently introduced to. That's a really good one, even for baking. You can throw orange juice into your cookies if you're trying to cut down on sugar. Swap out your soda for herbal tea. Chocolate, 70% cacao is always going to taste better, and you're upgrading it as well. Okay, so now we're going to move on to practice. But before that, I want to see, what else do we have here? Half rice and half cauliflower rice. Absolutely. Yes, thanks for mentioning that, Mel. The seeds are less expensive. What did I say about Killer Dave's bread? Okay, so Killer Dave's bread, depending on which one you buy, I find to be like probably the best, in terms of nutrient density. I also said that it was about $7, pretty expensive. But I think if you were trying to look for a really good bread and you don't care how much money you spend on it, Killer Dave's is good. So monk fruit powder. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Killer Dave's is also in Costco now, so you can get a
cool.
pack, and then just freeze the other pack so you don't waste. And it's about $7 for the 2 loaves if you can get it at your Costco.
Oh, good. Perfect. Thanks for mentioning that, Mel. I don't go to Costco, so I don't know this. Sonal, you have a question on monk fruit powder. Let's table that pure monk fruit, because I don't use monk fruit. It's just something that I've heard of, but pure monk fruit is available online. You just have to look at the labels. But I'm going to talk about labels a little bit more. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to talk about labels a little bit more, and you'll kind of get an idea of how to pick a good sweetener as well. Okay, so what I was thinking for this is I'm going to go over a couple of examples, and then if any of you want to share a label and get my thoughts on it, I'll stop before we move on. But I have a lot of examples, so happy to go through all of my examples if no one has questions. But I'd also love to hear questions, because again, if you have a question, probably others have the same question. Okay, so the first one here, we're kind of going to do some of it quiz form. I want you to tell me here. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to look at the chat while we're talking. So the quiz is called Spot the Refined Carb. So I don't know if you can see the ingredients well enough here. I'm just going to read them off. But we're looking at Lay's baked chips. And the ingredients are dried potatoes, cornstarch, corn oil, sugar, sea salt, soy lecithin, dextrose, and annatto extracts. Now, I want you to only focus on what is the refined carb. We're not going to talk about fats. We're not going to talk about protein. Okay, so we're going to try to identify as many as possible. Dextrose, absolutely, is one of them. And you will see that in a lot of processed foods. Dextrose is a filler. It comes from corn. And so it's basically a more refined version of cornstarch. Cornstarch is in it too. Cornstarch and dextrose. So they've got the cornstarch and the more refined version. Sugar, absolutely. Another refined carb. What else? All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is going to give you the answer because you guys got most of it. I've added dried potatoes to the answer. The reason for that being, I am extremely suspicious when it comes to labels. Anytime I see anything like this, I start asking questions like, why did they use dried potatoes? What does that mean? Are they potato flakes? What all did they take out of this potato? You know, so you've got the dried potatoes that are questionable, okay? But I'm going to put them in the refined carb category because it's not a whole potato. They've dried it, they've dehydrated it in some form. So we've got this snack, baked Lays, which is trying to be healthy because they're baked. They've got potatoes, but they've got a lot of corn-related things. They've got sugars, you know, sea salt, other things in it, but not necessarily a healthy option for a snack. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This one. We've got family size Oreos, double stuff Oreos. Can people name the refined carbs in here? Okay, so Vivian, I'm going to take your answer from the old one. We've got sugar, yep. High fructose corn syrup. Enriched flour, absolutely. Cornstarch, again. What else? Okay. This one, I think you guys got most of it. Here's where I'm suspicious. We've got cocoa, which is processed. So again, it's coming from, you know, the cacao plant. And you don't know what extent it's been processed. Now, I know that I, as a nutritionist, am taking this too far. Same with chocolate. I'm like, okay, well, what all have they taken out of it, right? And they're not claiming this to be a healthy food in any form whatsoever. So again, it's more for you to kind of question what is in there. You know, the fact that they've used unbleached flour may be good. However, then they've added a whole bunch of other stuff in there. You can see all the B vitamins that they took out, the iron. You know, they're basically telling you, we took all of this stuff out and now we have to put it back in because this isn't nutritious enough. But your body's not processing those B vitamins the same way. So just, you know, things to know. Okay, let's go to this next one. This one, I just gave you the answer because it was just too much. It was too big of a label. This is Wonder Bread. There's a lot in there, just a lot. Yes, the carbs are similar to what we saw in the previous one. We've got modified cornstarch, but we also have sucrose and we have sugar. So we have two types of sugars. But again, it's like, you know, what is everything else? Why do we have all of this in there? A lot of it is to become more shelf stable. Some of it is to make it palatable. But there isn't much in there that is of nutritious value. Okay. All right, then. Okay, so I'm gonna stop my share really quick here. I want to just quickly, we have about 10 minutes left. I have a few more examples. Does anyone have a nutrition label that you'd like me to look at?
Gupta,
If you
I
do,
have
raise
a
your hand.
question. I have a question
Sure.
for you. My name
Yeah,
is Ruby.
absolutely.
You know,
Hi, Ruby.
when you're looking at the carbs label, let's say, for example, it says 30 grams of carbs, dietary
Mm-hmm.
fiber 5 grams, added sugar 10 grams, and then
Mm-hmm.
where are the other hidden carbs? I mean, it doesn't tally up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the dietary label doesn't tell you everything. And the reason that I don't spend as much time, I spend more time looking at the ingredients. The 10 grams of sugar is a really good telling point because, you know, I'd want to know kind of what the serving size is and what you're kind of looking at. I literally don't look at, I look at fiber. That's my main, you know, thing, because the other stuff that they're getting out of it is probably going to be, you know, things like the protein, things like, you know, there's probably a little bit of fat in there. It depends on what the food is. Would you, can you tell me what the food is?
I don't have it offhand, but it's like the
Okay,
other day
that's
I
okay.
was in the store and I was looking at the
Mm-hmm.
labels. So it wasn't adding up as to, because I know the total carbs should add up to what is below it. And those maths were not adding up.
Yeah, it won't add up
It's like
because
they
they're
put the
they're taking
dietary
out,
fiber and the,
because, you know, think about the slide that I showed right in the beginning of what a whole carb has in it, right? It has fiber, antioxidants, protein, starches, sugar. So there's a lot in there, right? So they're kind of taking that carb, they're removing stuff out of it, right? And there's, you know, there's going to be some of it's going to be fiber, some of it's going to be sugar. There's other aspects to it that they is not, you know, necessarily, like, they don't seem necessary to put on a nutrition label according to the FDA. And so I would be looking more at, okay, how much fiber is it? What is the fiber source? What is the ingredient list telling me? Because sometimes the fiber is just nonsense. It's like they've thrown in something just to compensate, and you're not going to get anything out of this food. I don't know if that helps you, Ruby, in any way.
yes, it does. Because, I mean, I just couldn't add up the math. And I told myself,
Yeah.
do I need to go to mathematics class again? I mean, it was really weird the way they were throwing out the numbers. So, okay, the
Yeah.
ingredients is the main part. Okay, thank you, Mukta.
I would say, yeah, no problem. I would say that that's kind of, you know, a really good place to start. Start with the ingredients, then, you know, look at how many grams of sugar and all of that. Okay, so let's look at this Cajun linguine, hard unbleached red spring wheat flour. Okay, if anybody wants to throw in what the refined carbs are, feel free to. But got natural spring water, eggs, paprika, garlic powder. Okay, you tell me, Karen, what do you think? Do you think this is going to be a problematic linguine?
I don't even know what hard unbleached red spring wheat flour is.
And I don't either, to be completely frank. So this is where I would Google hard unbleached flour and be like, okay, what exactly is this? Now with pasta, and the reason I haven't talked about pasta is because pasta is by nature refined. It's going to be refined. It's going to have the same effects as sugar, you know, on your body. You just have to make sure that, you know, this looks like a pretty reasonable pasta given what they've used. But again, I would just do a bit of research on red spring wheat flour, figure out if that's going to be workable for you. But everything else in terms of the ingredient list, that looks fine. My only suggestion with pasta is always try to add some fiber to your meal, whether it's in the form of vegetables, beans, what have you, because pasta is always going to be a refined carb. It's always going to act like sugar in your body. Okay, I'm going to take one more here. This Bob's Red Mill. Oh, okay. She gave us the description of hard red wheat flour. Thank you so much, Mel. I want to show you just a couple more examples because I think this is going to help help you with buying bread and buying sugar. So this next one is a Trader Joe's sprouted whole grain bread. Can anyone name the refined carbs here? Okay, I'm just going to give this to you because I think we're running out of time here. Okay, so whole wheat flour is a refined carb, right? Already. But we also have, that's, one of the ingredients at the bottom. But we also have sprouted whole grains in there. So, generally speaking, this is a decent bread to use because they're kind of going out of the way to tell you we're using sprouted whole grains. They have a little bit of honey in there. They have molasses in there. Those are all refined, but they're, not as refined as sugar. So I would say in the big scheme of things, this is not a bad bread to use, sprouted rye. Okay, here is the last example of labels. This is a really big one. I've had this conversation with many clients. When you're choosing stevia, for example, because Splenda is out of the question. Splenda basically has dextrose, maltodextrin, sucralose. Sucralose is like a 0-calorie sweetener, but it doesn't matter because it has dextrose and maltodextrin, which are basically glucose. And so they're terrible for your blood sugar. Here we've got stevia in the raw, which is a pretty famous brand for stevia. Again, dextrose is used. It's the first ingredient, so it's a filler. That's a red flag. Truvia, first ingredient, erythritol. It's not even stevia. Okay, so again, they've done this because they think it's going to taste better. Just try to find a pure stevia leaf extract if that's what you want to buy. Okay, and same with the monk fruit. Make sure it's a pure monk fruit extract. Powder is fine, whatever it is. Just make sure that there's no other fillers because that's how they bulk it up. And that ends up being a little bit less expensive. All right, we're going to do a really quick recap here. And then if you have any more questions, feel free to ask. So in terms of carbs, we know that they're essential for optimal health. There's no good or bad carbs, just whole or refined. You need to find your own balance. Whole carbs are more nutrient dense. I've talked about this a lot. Refined carbs behave like sugar in your body. So not good if you overdo it. You can make simple swaps to introduce whole into your diet and kind of limit the refined. It sort of crowds out, think about it in that way. You're crowding out your meal with whole grains and whole foods and fruits and vegetables, all the good stuff. And then read the labels. Labels are always going to give you the power to make a decision. All right. Let's see, what's my next slide? I've mentioned this a few times, but I do have a session coming up on June 9th to talk about blood sugar basics. And this is where I'm going to go deeper into what does sugar do, how to balance your meal, and using carbs, using refined carbs, what have you. And you can find me at mookscooks.com. If you have questions, feel free to email me, and you'll get the handout after class. So feel free to use that to contact me. And that's it. Any questions?
I just wanted to jump in really quick to everyone that joined. If you love this class, if you would consider donating, 100% of donations go back into programming. If you don't have the means to donate, there was a wonderful option, and I put it in the chat box, of Amazon Smile. If you buy anything on Amazon, you can go into Amazon Smile, click on the link that's in the chat box. It'll tell you, you'll go step by step. You'll pick Banyan Tree Women's Collective as your choice of nonprofit. And when you buy items, a percentage, even though it's small, goes towards a fund that Amazon will then gift to your nonprofit of choice. And that is a really great way to generate donation and funds. So we can keep offering these programs, and we can keep educating, and we can keep coming together as a community, and we can keep healing on our individual healing journeys. That's all I got to. You did have a question though about chickpea pasta, which Adrian.
Yeah. So yeah, Adrian, I'm happy to answer that. So chickpea pasta, I would say, again, it's going to be refined. You want to take a look at what the fiber content is in there, how many grams of fiber, but I would always still, whenever I use pasta, I always try to make sure there's some sort of fiber associated with it, whether it's in the salad next to it or, somewhere in your meal, you want to try to have some fiber. Any other questions?
And I just, the people that are on, if you're wanting to take to the next level, which is cleaning up your home, because we often think about what we put in our mouths, but we often forget about what we clean our house with or what we put on our bodies. We have a Toxins 101 workshop tomorrow night. And we will, during the event, if you live in the United States, we will be raffling away Dr. Bronner's soaps and his products. And then we'll do a giveaway after the program too for everybody that attended. So Dr. Bronner's has donated a whole bunch of stuff. So we're going to be getting healthy, safe, non-toxic products into your house. But you got to show up, and you gotta get yourself educated about what's being used in your home and on your body. And that's for tomorrow night. All right, Miss Mukta, I think we're good. Everybody's going back to work.
Thank you everyone for your time. I hope you learned something and hope to see you soon.
Thank you
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.